Hey guys, how's it going? It's Liam Sheriff here with the final installment of the six-part series of the principles of fat loss. Today we're going to talk about insulin control. I'm going to explain why insulin is hugely important in terms of your fat loss. First of all, if you don't know much about insulin, I'm going to explain a few little things for you. Firstly, insulin is secreted by the pancreas every time you eat something. The reason it's secreted is because when you eat, your blood sugar level rises. So insulin then needs to go and collect the sugar and the nutrients, or the energy if you like, and act as a kind of energy bus to transport these nutrients and energy to wherever your body needs them. So whether that's the muscles, whether that's the organs, whether that's just your tissues in general, insulin will go and collect it, and then it will go and store it wherever is required. The more simple the sugar, or the more simple the chemical structure of the food, generally in things like refined flours or white carby products, that actually equals a higher insulin spike. So the more simple the sugar, or the more simple the food that you put in your mouth, and the more processed it is, the higher your insulin levels will spike. Likewise, the higher your blood sugar levels will spike. Insulin is not just relevant to diabetics. If more type 2 diabetics were made aware of insulin and they had a better understanding of how insulin works, then they wouldn't become diabetic in the first place. So from a health aspect, it's very important to understand a little bit about insulin. Ultimately, the higher and more prolonged exposure you have to the levels of insulin, the more fats you're going to store in your body. So it's really important to get it under control so that we can get guaranteed fat loss. So this is what we call a diagram of high GI and low GI foods. If you haven't actually seen this before, then GI foods are something that, GI index or glycemic load is a chart that basically identifies the effect that certain food groups have on your blood sugar levels. Okay, so you can Google it and find the actual chart, but to give you an example, things like sugar, wheat, processed foods, alcohol, etc., are all what we call high GI foods, and these have the most profound effect on your blood sugar levels. So they basically spike blood glucose the highest. Okay, in turn, insulin levels would also need to come as high, because it's insulin's job at the end of the day to come and lower the blood glucose level. Alternatively, things like vegetables, things like legumes or nuts or seeds, for example, have a much lesser effect in spiking your blood sugar levels and your insulin levels. So ideally, this is the kind of sort of rhythm that you like, that we would be aiming for at least 90% of the time. Unfortunately though, today we follow something more like this. Okay, so most people's blood sugars are completely out of control. Insulin goes on a bit of a roller coaster throughout the day, and we have drastic periods of cravings and fat storage. If, for example, you eat something like a chocolate bar, your blood sugar levels will go massively high. Insulin would then come along and try and transport it to wherever it needs, which would bring down the level of blood sugar extremely fast. Fortunately, this happens all a little bit too quick, and there's a slight delay back to your brain to tell your pancreas to stop secreting insulin, and hence your blood sugar levels go lower than what they were before at a fasted blood sugar level. Basically, when it goes lower, you're then starting to feel tired, you're starting to feel lethargic and a bit groggy, so then your body wants to bring your blood sugar levels back up to what it was before, because it knows that if you give it some energy, then it'll be able to do so. So that's when things like cravings occur. Unfortunately, it wouldn't normally be carrot and hummus that you would aim for. It would be something more simple again, so maybe some refined processed snacks, which would have the exact same effect, and likewise it would be repeated over and over again. And the problem with this is that this would just go on throughout the day, okay, especially if you're eating very refined, simple, sugary products. So throughout the day, generally, you'd just be craving, you'd be tired 1 minute, and then the next minute you'd just be in fat storage mode. So it's really important to find the balance in between the two. So some of the problems that insulin will sort of have within your body and your fat loss is that if you consume more sugar than you need, then insulin will go sky high. Okay, and it'll go too high too often, and it will disrupt its actual normal rhythm. Inevitably, this will mean that you store much more fat on your body than you're supposed to. Every rapid or sharp insulin spike equals a fat storage period, followed by a period a period of craving. Insulin resistance is a term to describe the early stages of diabetes, and unfortunately, continual exposure to high insulin levels generally leads to obesity. So it's quite common that obese people are diabetic as well, and that's totally diet related generally because they're living on this processed, sugary, refined foods. So these are my 3 keep it simple rules. These are really straightforward, and if you follow them, then you basically get hold of insulin and you make it more rhythmic, and you basically minimize the harmful effect of fat storage that it can have. So number 1, avoid white carbs as much as possible. Most white carbs are actually toxins anyway, but things like sugar, flours, fruit, refined foods, pasta, breads, etc., they're all classed as white carbs. Okay, so anything that's needed sort of flour or white carbs to make it is essentially a white carb. So avoid them as best you can. If you need to have things like rice and potato or floury goods, then make sure that you consume these post-workout, okay, within sort of 30 to 45 minutes post-workout. Consuming them post-workout actually works best because the insulin sensitivity is lower due to depleting the stores of energy. Okay, so your stored glycogen stores, which is basically what we store carbohydrates as, that's obviously depleted because we've used some of our reserves during the workout, which means that if you eat some starchy carbs or some sort of refined simple carbs, if you like, post-workout, then the spike isn't going to be as profound, okay, because your body can accommodate it better. If you simply can't do without, then you need to learn how to damage and limit the damage, okay. So having things like good fats and protein will actually help reduce insulin levels, okay. So using good fats and protein with rice products, so for example rice cakes and hummus, or having fruit with nuts and seeds are 2 prime examples, and certainly 2 good practices that you should adopt. Cinnamon and spices such as turmeric also has a controlling effect on insulin, but it's not of course profound enough as would be simply removing them. So the bottom line with insulin is this, my friends: spiking insulin too often makes you fat. If you learn to control insulin, you learn to control fat, and you will get fat loss.